Okay, so as you can see on this slide, the paper is all about the UK. So a really good way to start this is thinking about the whole geography of the UK itself. It's split into the UK physical aspects, so that's like coasts and rivers, as you can see on here, and a bit about geology, which just means rocks. And on here, I've got the pages where you can find these topics in the CGP guide to make it really straightforward. If you've been checking Arbor, you'll have seen these have been on Arbor over the whole weekend as well. So hopefully you've already had a look at them. But if not, I would suggest that you take a look at any areas on here that are your areas of weakness. Remember the processes, for example, so the processes of erosion are exactly the same for coasts and for rivers. The processes of weathering, for example, are exactly the same. The processes of transportation in water. So as long as you revise those core areas and then take a look at the case studies, you're going to be really well prepared for this exam. Just a quick reminder that the case studies in this paper 2 exam are only 4-mark questions. So again, you do need to know them, but if you get in the exam and you can't remember your specific upland case study, for example, you can't remember the Lake District, talk about another place in the UK that you know is upland, and you're probably going to get a couple of marks on that. Remember, 50% in this exam is going to easily get you a grade 5. So don't leave things blank, just attempt every question. Let's look at the next topics. Okay, so on here you can see you've got the human geography aspects, thinking about where people live, thinking about economic change across the UK. There's quite a few key terms in here that you might want to look up. So if you're looking at this and you don't know the words periphery, for example, core means central urban areas. Periphery is basically anywhere outside of that that's a more rural region. And lots of government policy is focused on regenerating urban areas because in the UK and in many countries, that's where most people live and most people are affected. It's also where most money is generated. Many people move into urban areas for better quality of life, better job opportunities, better education. However, some areas of cities are deindustrialised, and remember that means that factories have closed down, mainly because those factories are now in emerging countries. It's cheaper for us to use those workers, and we have a new economy in the UK, which simply means that we're mainly a tertiary sector workers and quaternary sector. Globalisation just means that we're a very well connected country. We've got lots of links with other countries. People talk about Heathrow Airport, for example, as a globally connected airport. You've also got some keywords on here, privatisation, the economy and privatising of different key fund areas. Free trade, which is when we were part of the EU, for example, we were able to trade quite freely and people were able to migrate more freely as well. And foreign direct investment simply means that money is invested in the UK from companies and other countries. As you can see, the London case study is really, really big for this key area. And I would say if you're watching this the night before the exam and your weakest case study is London, absolutely focus all your energy and attention on that case study because you can see it's a really chunky piece of work compared to the rivers and coastal and upland areas where realistically you could make something up if you needed to in the exam. You could talk about the coastal area of Bognor Regis or Felpham. London, you really need to know your stuff, and you can see there's quite a few areas there. All of the pages are listed for your CGP guide as well. Okay, so the fieldwork aspect. I know that lots of you really don't like the fieldwork questions, and I had to tell you that nationally across the UK, this is the area of the paper which students find the hardest. It's also the last section on the paper, so I think that means that many students are running out of time by the time they get to this area, and it also sometimes has some big keywords in there that throws people off a bit. Please, please, please attempt these questions. It's so important that Miss Pellegrino and I can see where you're finding things difficult so that we can help you fill in those gaps in knowledge before the real exams. So it's really important, first of all, that in your exam, it will have the option of choosing which fieldwork questions you answer. You're going to choose the coastal fieldwork and you're going to choose the urban fieldwork. Do not do the rivers fieldwork. Do not do the rural one. We didn't study those. We haven't looked at them at all. So you're going to choose just those two and you're going to answer the questions on just those two as well. Let's look at the next slide. So some students said that they'd really benefit from having clear ideas on the kind of questions that could be asked. So what we've done on this page, as you can see, is you've got clear ideas around what kind of questions might be asked, specific words that they might refer to in the exam as well. So this one's been done for our coastal fieldwork at Feltham Beach. If it was me revising this the night before, I would look at all those boxes. I would decide which of those are my weaker boxes where I think I can't really make that up. And I would just do a really simple look, cover, write, check. You've been doing that since primary school. And as you can see visually, these are really clear and straightforward to read. So if, for example, you didn't know different sampling methods, I would cover up the primary data, sampling, for example, and I would do a look, cover, write check to see if I can revise that information. We'll have a look at another one now for the urban fieldwork in Brighton. So here you've got some notes about the urban fieldwork in Brighton. Whether you went on these trips or not, I should also mention it, you're still going to need to answer the questions on it. So some of you might not have attended through illness, you might have been off sick, for example. You're still going to need to answer the questions on the coastal fieldwork. And luckily, because we live in such a coastal area, if you're not too sure about Feltham, most of you have been to Feltham Beach, most of you have been to Bognor Beach, and therefore you can just apply it to the local area. The examiner won't know whether you're talking about a fieldwork you did or whether you're making up a fieldwork you did in the local area. For the urban Brighton one, you probably do need to revise a little bit more content because Bognor itself isn't really a particularly urban big city area, it's more of a town. And again, I would use this to do look, cover, write, check, or get someone at home to quiz you on what you did and why you did it. One of the 8-mark questions will be about the fieldwork you conducted and short questions about the fieldwork you conducted. The other 8-mark question will be a made-up fieldwork that some students went on, either coastal or urban, because that's the areas we're looking at, and you will have to comment on the validity of their fieldwork. So let's have a look at what a question might look like so we can build our confidence for the exam. On this slide, I really want to have a look at the kind of unseen fieldwork that you have to answer. And as you can see at the top, it says, read the whole story. So what students tend to do for fieldwork is they look straight away at either the graph or the photo or the map, for example, that's in front of them. And they start unpicking what that graph or what that map shows, which is important. But the first thing that they actually need to do when they go in the exam is pick out some of the facts around what the students actually did. And you can see on this slide, I've put boxes around some key pieces of information. So this one is in 2017, a group of 20 students carried out questionnaires in an urban area on a Wednesday afternoon. Well, why is that important? That's important because on a Wednesday afternoon, many people will be at work. The people who are going to be hanging around on a Wednesday afternoon are probably going to be either unemployed or elderly or both. They asked 40 randomly selected residents. Well, 40 is not very many. Random selection, is that the most reliable? Is it open to bias? Did they only ask people who looked approachable, for example? To select the 3 problems in the area they rated as the most serious. They compared these results with the results of a similar survey gathered by students in 2014 who also randomly selected 40 residents. And I want you to unpick from these things what are already some issues with the way in which they've collected their data. Well, issue number 1, they went on a Wednesday afternoon. They've only gone once. That means they've only got one sample size of 40 people. That's not a very big sample when you're asking about, data collection. They used random sampling. They didn't use stratified sampling or systematic sampling to choose every, for instance, 5th person that walked past them. And the data from before was done in the same way, so also quite unreliable. So those aspects of it make it quite an unreliable piece of data that's been collected. You also do want to draw in what you can see on the graph, and you can see at the bottom they've got these percentages, the percentage of people interviewed. But the problem with percentages being displayed in this way is it kind of distorts the data. Because as you can see, litter and dirt in the streets, it looks like it's a real extreme problem. 35% of people said that was a real problem in 2014. And obviously by 2017, 27% said that. So you could say, well, that area has improved. So if I'm thinking about answering this 8-marker and it says, assess the evidence for this conclusion, and we've got that at the top. What this question is actually asking us to do is to assess the student's evidence. That means how reliable is the student's evidence? In the same way they might ask, assess the sites chosen for this coastal fieldwork. They're not asking you to tell them about the data as such. They're asking you to tell them about how reliable that data is, how valid that data is. So when I'm answering these kinds of 8 marks questions, what I normally try to do is a paragraph that shows how the evidence is reliable and is important. And in this situation, I probably would say, well, the most reliable aspect of what they've done is they compared data from 2014 to data from 2017, and both the sample sizes were the same. So that is reliable because this means that. And then my second paragraph would say, however, I feel that overall the evidence is largely unreliable. My reason for this is, as shown in figure 10, because remember we have to refer to the figure, the data was collected on a Wednesday afternoon using random sampling. This is unreliable because most of the people they spoke to will have been unemployed and therefore it's not enough variation of residents. It's also random sampling, so that's not really reliable enough in terms of the people selected. Overall, I then need to say, overall I believe their evidence is or is not reliable because. I might even suggest how it could be made more reliable. It could be made more reliable by going on a Saturday afternoon or going on multiple occasions. You can write that for your coastal fieldwork or for an urban fieldwork. Going there more than once to get a bigger sample of data. Asking more people to get a bigger sample of data. Those sorts of things, working out a mean to kind of get rid of any anomalies or outliers, or working out median scores. Any of that is going to be brilliant in a conclusion. But the key thing is read the whole story. Another thing that throws some students off in this exam is the 8-mark questions. So I wanted to show you another example and how I would attack it in an exam. So Miss Pellegrino and I have been talking quite a lot to you about how we need to attack the question. And one of the ways that you can do this really easily is using the bug technique. So box the command word, you can see I've done that on this question, assess how far. And then UG stands for underline the geography. The geography in this question is coastal communities, protected from coastal flooding, rising sea levels. And what that does straight away is it focuses my attention on what the question is asking me to do. It cuts out all the fluffy extra bits. So I know that in this question I need 2 paragraphs. I need to think about how far coastal communities should be protected, given the threat of rising sea levels. And then the other part of the argument is probably going to be how far they should not be protected. Okay, so it's a really nice straightforward question, but I've cut through all of it by annotating it. You can see on the left-hand side then I've got this resource. I've never seen this before. I've never visited this place. What they want you to do is interpret resources, and you can annotate on it. You can pick out facts. I'm looking for facts that show me why areas should be protected. So for me, the fact that shows me it should be protected is that in Fairbourne's 2-mile-long Blue Flag Beach, it attracts visitors throughout the year. I'm going to say this is a reason for protecting the coastline, because those tourists will bring lots of money into the area. That will support the local economy and help to improve the economy further and services, etc. In my second paragraph, I'm going to argue, however, to some extent, coastal communities should not be protected. And as I can see in figure 1C, the council will stop maintaining the sea defences, mainly because Fairbourne has a population of 721. This means that there aren't many people's homes to be protected, and therefore the benefit of protecting the coastline completely outweighs the value of those 721 properties because they can move elsewhere. In my conclusion, I'm going to argue that overall, many areas should be protected from coastal flooding, but only when the benefits actually outweigh the cost of the land. It needs to be a place that needs protecting because it brings in money to the area, or it has a high population, and preferably both of those. As you can see here, if it doesn't bring in enough money or there aren't enough properties there, then those places should not be protected. Money should be spent in other places where they are of more value. So by understanding the question first, then picking out key facts I'm going to use, I've then got a perfect 8-mark answer all of my knowledge for that is coming from this resource. So I have to be really good at annotating and picking out the facts I need. So this is the same slide that you saw when you looked at the paper one night before exam, and it's exactly the same. We keep this the same 8-mark structure throughout all of the papers to make it easier for you and because it's going to help you gain the maximum marks. This paper is exactly the same in that it will have an 8-mark question in it, and your expectation is to have 2 clear paragraphs as shown on the screen and then a conclusion. However, on this paper too, I know that many of you really stress about the looking at a new resource and not knowing what to do. If that happens to you and you're actually in danger of leaving it blank, please cross out the word assess or evaluate and write the word explain instead. So your 2 paragraphs become, for example, as shown in figure 2, there is a high population density in urban areas. This means that, and then carry on. And then you do a second paragraph. For example, as shown in figure 2, there is a high level of rainfall in the north of the country. This means that, etc. So make sure that whatever happens on these 8 markers, you lift some knowledge from the figure, you try to develop it saying this means that, and always put at least a sentence on the end saying overall what you think the most significant thing is or what the most important thing is from the figure you can see in front of you. This slide was also in the paper one night before news, so you may have seen it before. It's just a reminder about the structures that we use. So remember your TEA, for your trend pattern questions, there will be graphs, there will be OS maps, there will be all sorts of different diagrams in here. If it says describe the distribution, the trend or the pattern, you know you're using trend, evidence, anomaly. If there is no anomaly, you give another piece of evidence. It's important, by the way, that you state an anomaly shown in figure 3 is. Don't just write, a number and hope that the examiner knows that you mean that's an anomaly. Remember your knowledge, that's mainly going to come from some figures within this, but also from your brain for the shorter answer questions. Remember your knowledge and understanding, this means that. And for the explain questions, remember to look at, is it saying explain A, in which case it's explain one thing, and you're probably going to do K, U, 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 or is it saying explain two, in which case you know it's K, U, K, U. Just as before, don't faff about writing in full sentences, just tell me the answer. So if you had a question like this, you're not going to write 3 human activities that increase CO2 are. You're just going to write the 3 things down and get on with it. Revise your facts from your CGP guide just before you go to bed. Do that in particular for your fieldwork, which you can revise really well in detail so it's memorised in your memory. Do the 8 markers first if you're worried about it. And just remember that to get 5 on this exam, a grade 5, we need to get at least 50% marks, okay? So if you're panicking in this exam, just really think about which questions can you do, which are going to be the easiest. Try not to leave anything blank at all. So last little reminder, we will be having a revision session in the lunchtime in the hall, just before you go into the paper 2 exam. You've got these posters which are on every geography door, so if you're stuck or you think you've forgotten some of the content or how to revise, where to revise, please take a look at these. You've got your green revision guides which you can use, and all the lists that I gave you before have the page numbers to use. And you can quiz each other. One of the best things you can do is actually revise in groups together. Quiz each other, teach each other. It's going to build your confidence. Email us, come see us if you need any last minute help. I know you can all do really well on this paper 2 exam. Just keep an eye on that timing as well. So it's an hour and a half. Try and allocate half an hour to each section. So section A, B, C, half an hour each. Good luck.